Welcome back to Pod the Metal On. My name is Dave Cullen. We're back once again for a metal music review. Today we're going to be talking about the new and much anticipated album from Spiritbox in Tsunami Sea, showcasing the band's evolution, blending their signature metalcore sound with experimental elements. So by the time Spiritbox entered the studio for Tsunami Sea, they were no longer an underground phenomenon. They're becoming one of the modern metal's most talked about bands. But at the same time, with that status came heightened expectations, artistic challenges, and the weight of maintaining their identity while pushing forward. So Spiritbox's journey from a cult favourite to a genre-defining act was anything but conventional. Formed in 2017 by vocalist Courtney LaPlante and guitarist Mike Stringer, both formerly from I Wrestled a Bear Once, the band initially self-released music, growing organically through word of mouth. Their early material, such as their self-titled EP from 2017 and their singles collection from 2019, showcased their signature blend of ethereal atmosphere, crushing heaviness, and introspective lyricism. However, it was their 2020 released Holy Roller that catapulted them into the metal mainstream. The track's relentless groove and savage delivery struck a balance that was almost perfect between brutality and accessibility, making them one of the most exciting new voices in modern metalcore. So while the success of the single put them on the map, it also created expectations for them. Could Spiritbox sustain this momentum, or was it just a viral once-off? Well, then came their debut album in Eternal Blue, which proves that it was no fluke. It was a carefully crafted album that combines their gent-leaning heaviness with haunting melodies. That was both commercially and critically successful. Songs like Circle With Me, Constance, and Secret Garden demonstrated their range, proving they just weren't any other metalcore bands. However, Eternal Blue also brought challenges for them. For example, while the album was widely praised, some listeners felt it leaned more into atmosphere than raw heaviness. For example, bands who wanted more of a Holy Roller style aggression for the entire album were met with a more balanced and moody experience. Certainly Spiritbox weren't just becoming a promising act, they were leading a movement, you could say. They had to navigate mainstream recognition while staying true to their sounds. The band also had to face grueling tour schedules, and by 2023, long-term bassist Bill Crook left, replaced by Josh Gilbert, formerly from As I Lay Dying. And while Gilbert's addition bolstered their live presence, lineup changes always bring eternal adjustments too. What has become evident with Spiritbox in their strengths is their ability to defy genre conventions. They shudder metalcore, gent, alternative metal, and even progressive elements, pulling from influences like Deftones, Meshuggah, Tesseract, and Evanescence, without being confined to any single influence. However, this versatility also meant they had to face an identity crossroads. The success of their Rotoscope EP from 2022 suggested they were willing to lean into more industrial and nu metal influences. Some fans even want them to go further in this direction, for example. Then you had tracks like Constance that showed an ability to create deeply emotional, almost cinematic music. Would they embrace a more ambient alternative direction instead? But there was also, with the weight of expectation, a risk of making an Eternal Blue Part 2 rather than evolving. Another critical factor with Spiritbox was also their live performances. Before Eternal Blue, they had limited experiences playing live due to their slow burn rise. But by 2023-24, they had toured extensively with heavyweights like Ghost, Bring Me the Horizon, and Architects, proving their ability to command massive audiences. This experience, you could say, helped shape their approach leading up to Tsunami Sea. They needed material that translated well live, with a stronger rhythm foundation and more anthems. They also had to clearly balance technicality with accessibility, assuring songs weren't just complex but also engaging for festival crowds. And while they now firsthand were able to see what resonated with their fans, this could likely influence their songwriting decisions going forward, at least with this album. Courtney LaPlante has always been an introspective lyricist, writing about grief for Constance, disillusionment from Circle With Me, and personal struggles from Yellow Jackets. So leading up to Tsunami Sea, themes like self-perception, industry, exhaustion, and resilience have become increasingly prevalent. Also, themes like the pressures of success, online scrutiny, and the expectations placed on women in metal music has also played a role in shaping the album's lyrical direction. Spiritbox have always walked a fine line between vulnerability and aggression, and this duality seemed way more pronounced from pre-album interviews going into this album. So by 2024, last year, Spiritbox had a choice. Either double down on the formula that made Eternal Blue successful, or radically evolve and risk alienating part of their audience. Alternatively, they could also find a middle ground, experimenting while staying true to their core sounds. You also have to consider that before recording this album, the band were in a very pivotal position. They were respected, but still relatively new in the grand scheme of modern metal. They're also in a position where they're balancing artistic growth with mainstream appeal, while navigating internal and external pressures while redefining their sounds. So as I mentioned, Spiritbox's journey leading up to Tsunami Sea was defined by rapid ascension, creative risk-taking, and the challenge of sustaining their momentum. They entered the album not necessarily as underdogs, but as a band with something to prove to their fans, their critics, and even themselves. So the question wasn't at all whether Spiritbox could stay relevant, especially this early in their career. It was what kind of band they wanted to become. And as we'll talk about now, Tsunami Sea would be their answer. Let's talk about that answer now by first talking about the overall composition and cohesion of this album. So the album sequencing genuinely works well with a sense of forward momentum that makes it a very engaging listen. Songs like Perfect Soul blend smoothly into Keep Sweet, creating a cohesive experience. However, there's also a few moments where I feel the pacing stumbles a little bit. For example, Crystal Roses introduces a more southern electronical shift. While it seems very ambitious, it also feels very abrupt to some listeners, at least that's how I felt. Spiritbox have always balanced melody, aggression, and atmosphere very well, and Tsunami Sea is no different. The band expands their sonic palette, incorporating elements of industrial, drum and bass, and more electrical textures. No Loss, No Love and Soft Spine showcases their adventurous shift, though at times the shifts in style feel more like experimentation for their own sake, rather than a natural progression of their sound. The interludes and transitions are handled with intent, making the album feel like a journey rather than just a collection of songs, which is always a plus. But that said, some moments like the fade out of Fanta Morgana feel like a missed opportunity rather than a seamless transaction, for example. At 11 tracks overall, Tsunami Sea doesn't overstay its welcome, but I do feel its midsection slightly sags away. The atmospheric breaks between heavier tracks, while they're very intriguing, sometimes slow down momentum rather than enhancing it. And I just feel maybe some trimming and restructuring of some of the moments like that could have resulted in an even tighter experience for me. Now let's talk about the album's songwriting and arrangements. So Spiritbox definitely continued to excel at crafting striking moments, particularly in the vocal department as well. Perfect Soul is one of the strongest choruses that I've ever written, and Soft Spine leaves a lasting impression with its venomous energy. But when you compare it to Eternal Blue, there's fewer riffs that stand out as instinctively iconic. Few tracks lean more on atmosphere than hooks, which I feel divides the fan base in this. The band definitely plays with dynamic songwriting, which makes sure that no track feels monotonous. For example, Black Rainbow is very gent influenced, while Rides the Wave moves between soaring cleans and gut-punching breakdowns. But there is also a couple of songs, particularly No Loss, No Love, where it almost relies on a familiar soft then heavy structures, which while effective feels very predictable. Lyrically and tonally, the album delves in themes of self-perception, resilience and disillusion. Corey LaPlante's vocal performances elevate these themes in particular, particularly in Keep Sweet, which conveys a very eerie vulnerability. So the album genuinely succeeds in creating an emotional connection, though its more experimental moments may feel more detached compared to the rawness of their previous work as well. Overall, the lyrics feel more introspective and conceptual than Eternal Blue, tackling themes, as I mentioned, of identity, industry, deception, and personal growth. Soft Spine is a highlight for sure, taking direct aim at the toxicity of the music industry. There's also some tracks, however, that feel more cryptic than compelling, occasionally sacrificing direct impact for abstraction, for example. Now let's talk about the performance and musicianship of the album. Spiritbox definitely remain technically proficient, with Mike Stringer's guitar work blending precision and atmosphere. Zev Rose and Josh Gilbert form a very tight rhythm section, while Gilbert's bass lines cutting through more than previous releases, I feel. And while the album does showcase overall strong musicianship, I do feel there's moments where the technicality overall overshadows or any organic feel. Some transitions occasionally in the more experimental sections could benefit with a looser, more fluid execution. LaPlante vocally continues to prove why she's probably one of the most versatile vocalists in modern metal today. Her ability to shift from haunting cleans to feral screams are unmatched. I compare her to Tatiana Chemay-Luc. They're obviously different screams, but I draw a comparison to her for sure. I do feel though on some sections, particularly in Crystal Roses, where the vocals lean heavily into a processed, almost detached vocal style that may not resonate as strongly with fans who would prefer maybe a raw delivery. I love the fact that the drums and bass are given more presence in the mix, which I'll dive into in a second, especially in comparison to previous releases, with Zev Rose's drumming adding weight and nuance to the album. Tracks like Fata Morgana feature off-kilter rhythms that bring a fresh dynamic to the band sound as well, so that's definitely a plus. Now let's talk about the production and sound quality of the album. The production is polished, but it's also heavy, which endures clarity without sacrificing impact. Every instrument here is given room to breathe, but I also feel at times the electrical elements feel slightly overemphasized with expense to raw heaviness as well. The guitar tone remains dense, sharp, but also some tracks, particularly No Love No Loss, lean into a more almost synthetic quality. In contrast, the bass tone, which seems the exact opposite from a lot of albums I've heard so far, cuts through more effectively, adding welcome no-end depth. A more present bass. Thank you! The drums sound powerful but also organic as well, with an excellent balance of both punch and atmosphere. The kick and the snare in particular have such a satisfying impact as well, avoiding any over-processing, which can tend to be a bit of a plague at the moment in modern metalcore. For the most part, LaPlante's vocals are well balanced, but there are certain tracks like Crystal Roses where it experiments too much with effects that push them slightly too far off the mix as well. In terms of effects, Spiritbox continues to utilize atmospheric effects almost masterfully, with Black Rainbow in particular incorporating eerie soundscapes that add depth without feeling too overindulgent either. But there's also some tracks that lean a little too heavily in these elements as well, potentially alienating fans who prefer more of a fan-driven approach. I do feel there's some tracks that lean a little too heavily to these elements too, almost alienating people who listen to it who prefer more of a riff-driven approach. Now let's talk about the album's creativity and originality. So Spiritbox have always had a distinct identity, and Tsunami Sea reinforces that for sure. The blend of gent, alternative metal and electrical influences feel unique, though not as groundbreaking as Eternal Blue was upon its release, I feel. The band draws a wide range of influences, as I mentioned before, from electrical music to groove metal, but it always maintains their own voice, which is vital. But I still feel there's some tracks that feel more like an experiment rather than evolution, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, to be fair. They're continuing to push boundaries, but I also feel like the album feels more like a refinement from their style rather than a radical reinvention. It's an expansion of their sound rather than a complete transformation. Which now brings us on finally to our replay value and impact. So while the album's depth assures that we'll hold on to multiple listens for sure, I do feel its experimental moments can divide listeners too. Songs like Soft Spine and Black Rainbow will have high replay value, while others might not have the same staying power. Spiritbox will definitely remain one of the more influential bands in modern metal today, and Tsunami Sea will undoubtedly make waves. But I don't think this album redefines this genre the same way Eternal Blue did. It's a strong evolution, but not a revolution. So to conclude, Tsunami Sea is a strong, ambitious and immersive album that solidifies Spiritbox's position as I mentioned, probably one of the more creative bands in modern metal. But I do feel the experimental nature probably won't appeal to all listeners. Some stylistic choices feel more exploratory rather than fully realized. I will say for sure this album definitely rewards patience and repeated listens. Whether it suppresses Eternal Blue remains subjective. I feel like I'm leaning more to Eternal Blue right now, but maybe give it legs so I'll feel differently about it. Certainly right now it's up there, but it's not there yet. And that's another metal music review, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed today's review, please give us a like. If you'd like to follow us for more metal music reviews and more other content, please give us a subscribe. And please let us know what you think yourself. Do you agree or disagree with me? What were your favourite songs? What do you think stands out with Spiritbox in particular? Let us know in the comments. We'll be back very soon with some more metal music reviews and probably more stuff coming up soon. We hope to check you out then. But until then, I've been Dave Cullen. This has been Put the Metal On. Stay safe and enjoy the metal.